War and wilt upon Britannia, that she chooses to export the most stupid and vile of her sons to civilize Africa. O mistaken queen, come and evacuate these simpletons who understand nothing of you, neither your jurisprudence nor your language. Their perfect idiocy insults your royal foolishness. Clement, Michael, George, Argwings, Kodhek. Hi, my name is Ngina.
And I'm Mehek.
And we are the Disruptors. This is not just about Kenya, it's Kenya's story. Dark, very suspense-filled. In this season, we're going to be talking about post-independence political assassinations. So stay curious, stay comfortable, and enjoy.
So that was a crazy thing for him to be telling a white judge. And I'm not surprised he did that. This kind of sets the precedence of how much of a ballsy person CMG was. And to understand who he was, we sadly don't know enough. I'm going to preface this entire episode by saying there is not enough information. So what we have is from various news articles, what we could find from various sources, and a lot of interviews that were done with his wife, with his second wife, Joanne, and his daughter from the first wife. And to begin, we can give you a little bit of a brief where he was born. So CMG was actually born in Gem constituency in 1923. I got that right. I almost said Gem. In Gem constituency. And Gina has talked about his English name, but he actually has a different name called Chiedo Morgem, which actually has three meanings. So one of them is cream of Gem. The other one is fried in Gem. And the other one is oil of Gem. So take it as you will. But that's the kind of interpretations we've gotten. So born in 1923, we don't know much about his early life except for the fact that he went to a mission school. And then he would go on to study at St. Mary's in Yala. And then he would move to Uganda to study at St. Mary's College, where he would do his Cambridge certificate. And he comes back to Nairobi, I think, for a while. But then he goes on to study at Makerere, where he meets great stalwarts of, African society, Milton Obote being one of them. And at Makerere, he actually graduates with a teaching degree around the 1940s there. And he comes back, and what we know is that he teaches very briefly somewhere in Rift Valley, in Nyanza. But that's pretty much what we know until he's awarded his scholarship. So somewhere in like the 1950s, CMG gets a scholarship from the colonial government to actually go and study social sciences at what is, today known as the City University, if I'm not wrong. 1 second. Everyone, 1 second. I'll repeat that. Oh my God, it's Cardiff. City is on my list of universities. Sorry. Okay. Where was I?
Just that scholarship.
Scholarship. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So in 1947, CMG is awarded a scholarship by the colonial government to go study social sciences at Surrey, basically, which is now, if I'm not... Oh my God, I'm sorry. I'm listing the universities I'm applying to instead of what he went to study.
You just went Surrey and go like, Okay.
In 1940...
Do you want to start from the top?
No, I'll stop. Okay.
Sorry.
In 1947, CMG is awarded a scholarship to study at what is now known as Cardiff University, where he was to study a social science degree. So as we discussed in Gala's episode, the colonial government would decide what people would go ahead to study, and most of the time they would send people out to do social sciences degrees. And CMG wasn't a fan of that. He actually wanted to study law, and he does actually make a request to the government. They strike it down. They're like, we sent you to do social sciences. Why would we let you do law? And there's a racist connotation there. They didn't really believe that Africans could study a subject like law. So he still wanted to study law, and he applies to study for law. But the moment he does that, his scholarship is kind of like rescinded. And now he's in the UK, applied for a very expensive degree at that time. Luckily, his family actually pulls through. His father sells some plots of land back home and funds CMG's studies to become a lawyer. And he actually does end up with both degrees for social sciences and as a lawyer. And I believe in around 1949, he does graduate with a law degree. He becomes a lawyer. and he ends up becoming a barrister in the UK and is invited to Lincoln's Inn, which is kind of like a very prestigious law bar. There are about 4 of them in Wales and England. And it's quite the first time that an East African has become a barrister, that too in the UK. And things are going pretty well for him at this point. Like, he's in the UK, he's having a good time. And this is where he meets his first wife, Marvis Tate, who is an Irish. Their story is kind of cute, meatsy type thing. According to what we've read, Kodhek broke his leg and was admitted in hospital. Marvis was his nurse. So she was taking care of him, and I guess they fall in love at that during those interactions. And he proposes to her, and they get married. And at his wedding, Charles Njonjo, his best friend, is actually his best man there. So they get married, they're living quite a good life, and CMG decides he's going to make a return back to Nairobi in around 1951. So 1950s is a crazy, crazy time for Kenya. We're kind of at like a turning point in politics. Kau has given like an ultimatum. We are approaching emergency quite quickly, which, at that time we didn't know. And the Governor Mitchell, this is before Evelyn Baring, had started a crackdown on the Mau Mau. So this is a really, really hot potato kind of situation that, he's flying back to. But before we get into his dealings with the Mau Mau, CMG comes back to a very, very segregated Kenya. We need to remember that in the 1950s, Black people and white people were not allowed to mix. They were not allowed to live in the same places. They were not even allowed to marry. There was actually a law whereby if a Black man slept with a white woman, he faced jail time. The same was not when it was reversed. So quite a racial law. So CMG comes back with his very, very white wife. And he can afford to stay in Westlands. Sadly, he can't, because the rules state, since Mavis is white, she can only stay in either Muthaiga or Karen, those kind of areas, right? And for CMG, he had to stay in Eastlands. So they come to a compromise, and he's like, okay, we're going to stay in Babadogo, Ruaraka. However, Muthaiga is just one road down. One street across. And these whites were like, why is this Black man in a limousine? So CMG was gifted a limousine by his in-laws. And as much as they didn't approve of the marriage, they wanted their daughter to live a good life. So they had gifted the family a limousine. And of course, the white people didn't like that, right? So unfortunately, these laws were even crazier. They couldn't be seen together in public. They couldn't hold hands together in public. There's a story that their daughter, Carol, actually shares in one of her interviews later on, whereby her sister, Linda, was sick. She was an infant, and her mother rushed her to hospital, and they were refused treatment simply because this was a mixed child. And sadly, Linda does pass away. So you can kind of see how much these segregation laws are really, really pushing on them. And Kodhek, being the lawyer that he is, does actually go to court to challenge these, basically for the right for a married couple to live like a married couple, because it didn't make sense. And he wins. And this is one of his first of many, many wins that we'll see as we move ahead.
Yeah. In as much as he's fighting for his marriage, we can't forget that he's a lawyer. So he comes back to Kenya, and he's rejected a job at the AGs, the Attorney Generals. And one of his main reasons why he rejects this job is because of the poor pay. Kodhek was basically, Africans were being paid 3 times lower than their European counterparts. And Kodhek was like, yeah, no, I'm not taking this job. So what does he do? He joins the Chanan Singh Advocates, and then later on, he starts his own law firm. So now, let me give you guys a context. This is when state of emergency has been put into law, and now it's quite tough. People are being arrested. There's just a lot going on, and this same Mau Mau guys are being convicted. They're being taken to trial. And they need a lawyer. So who's our lawyer?
CMG.
Yeah. Yeah, and the reason why he ends up actually being called a Mau Mau lawyer is because of his really staunch beliefs around democracy, around equality. He actually believes that um, because like freedom, just because the Westerns have it, shouldn't mean that it's inapplicable to Africans, which is a very strong statement to be making in those in like in such an atmosphere like 1950s Kenya. So he ends up being a Mau Mau lawyer. He does most of these cases pro bono. And his daughter actually describes it this way. Oh, yeah, so he just had a lot of time and money. And so he would do these cases for free, accepting one chicken from here and another chicken from another place. That's how she describes it. And one of the major cases was when he was defending the Mau Mau who were being convicted because of the Larry massacres. Just to give you guys what Larry massacre was all about, it was Mau Mau versus the loyalists, basically. And it was fight over land, as usual. It was fight over land in Tigoni and Larry. And it was just, so the Mau Mau, so this night, the Mau Mau soldiers went into Larry and they attacked homes believed to be of loyalists. One of the loyalists is a very famous chief. He was called Chief Luka, and it was believed that this chief, this chief got into a deal to convince his people to move from Tigoni to Lari. And then now, in that deal, he got better land, he got a political position, and people were angry. So what do the Mau Mau do? They go and attack these people, and they literally burned people in their homes. Trigger warning. And the colonial masters, obviously, now use this particular event as to spread propaganda that Mau Mau are a terrorist group. And so CMG comes in as their lawyer, and he actually helps about more than 40 Mau Mau soldiers, and they actually go free. They are not convicted. They're not they're not given a death sentence or anything. There's also a very famous client of CMG who ends up being a Nyeri MP. We'll talk about him in a later date. And he ends up being a Nyeri MP. But when CMG took his case, he had literally been given the death sentence. Then he was taken to life imprisonment. And then he still fought for him until he was free, ends up being a member of parliament. I mean, he was one of the very famous clients of CMG. But there's something else CMG does during this time. In as much as he's representing the Mau Mau soldiers around this time, so of course it's very tricky. So what does he? So what do the colonial masters do? They disbar him, right? But then they say, okay, fine, you've taken my license. Cool. So what will I do? Because I have connections in the UK, I will partner up with the people I know from the UK who I studied with, journalists, and I will highlight what is going on in the country. And so he tries to bring out the Hola massacre, which we'll discuss at a later date as well. And he's now he actually describes what the colonialists are doing in Kenya the same way the Holocaust with the Nazi is being described, which is very crazy when you actually think about it. So this was just some of the things he was doing when he came back to the country. So yeah.
And then he gets into politics like everyone else, right?
Yeah.
We know that during the state of emergency, there was a complete disbarment of any form of political movements in the country, right? KU was dissolved. Everyone that was behind it was pretty much in jail at this point. And anyone that wasn't in jail was joining trade union movements. So we know Mboya had joined a trade union movement. We know that CMG later joined the trade union movement. And actually, Kodhek really does try to agitate for more representation, just like everyone else that was trying at that time. And we reach a point where now we have, we talked about the Littleton plan earlier on and how Ngala and Co had actually agitated for, allowing more representation of African members in LegCo. When that happens, when they're finally allowed to have more representation, they're allowed to form political movements. It gets funny here. It's really funny. So Kodhek forms a party. right? Once they're allowed. And it's called Kenya African National Congress. So just a side note, this is how the Brits played it. They said you can have your political parties, but they have to be district-based. You cannot have a national party. So if you had names like Kenya National in your party names, you were immediately not registered. And that happened with Kodhek because the British were like, this could be turned into a national movement. So Kodhek, being the very, audacious man that he is, he names it, and I'm sorry, he names it Hiroshima Nagasaki African Congress. And he knew he wouldn't be registered, right?
Yeah.
But he still did that. And it's funny because you could tell how much he was so done with the white man's antiques that he did that. But of course, after a lot of like back and forth, he finally, agrees to make it now. He agrees to call it Nairobi District African Congress, and he's the president of it. And things get more interesting for Kodhek and for me as well, because it just keeps getting funnier. Well, not funnier, but very messy.
Messy.
So Kodhek's biggest rival was Tom Mboya, our dimpled politician that everyone knows so much about. Yeah, that was his biggest rival in the political arena. Kodhek was known for being neutral. He didn't really take a stance at the current Cold War politics that was going on in the country, but he decided he's going to stick to what he believes in. He's going to remain neutral. However, he did fight Mboya for a seat in the LegCo, which unfortunately he didn't get in the Nairobi area. So he decides to refocus all of his politics back to Nyanza, where he actually wins a seat and he becomes, a representative of GEM. But the rivalry between Mboya and Kodhek was something to witness. During his campaigns, Mboya said, and I'm not quoting, but I'm paraphrasing, Mboya said something like how European women were an evil, kind of referring to how Kodhek had a white wife. And even his daughter acknowledges that there was a politician who brought up the fact that my mother was white. And it was messy. Why are you bringing in someone's wife into politics? But I digress. So of course we have all this going on. Kodhek is in politics, and wait, sorry. Yes. So Kodhek, of course, is now focusing all of his politics in Nyanza. He's there, and he becomes one of the representatives of GEM. So here we kind of see who he becomes later on in life. He does go on to become a part of the cabinet later on. After independence, he's a minister. He becomes a minister of foreign affairs at some point. And he had quite an illustrious political career. He was trying to do good for the people that he knew. Sadly, that gets cut short very, very quick.
Yeah. But before we even get to that, it's important to note that at some point he does divorce, gets a divorce with from the white wife.
Yes.
And around 1961 proposes to young Joanne, who's now the second wife. And this is very important. And they have a life of their own. So they move, they do start their life in Ruaraka, Babadogo, but they do move to Lavington. Again, very important note. So, of course, this is 6 years after independence, 1969, January. And where to start? Again, it's we had a very hard time trying to get details around this man's life and even death, which adds more question marks, basically. But we will discuss it as we go along. CMG, this time on 29th of January, they go for a reception at the Princess Hotel. So it's around 9-ish there, 9 p.m. And the wife decides to take CMG's car, like she's taken his car to go back home in Lavington to go see the kids and help them like get into bed, like just get them ready for bed. So she takes his Mercedes-Benz and goes home. And then she gets home at around 9. When it gets to 10 p.m., she's like, okay, where's this man? So she starts getting a bit worried about what's going on. And then 11 p.m., she gets more worried. She's like, where is this man? She gets worried, actually. She's like, what's going on? This man has never been. I think maybe in their marriage, he was never that late or something like that. And then 30 minutes later, she sees cops coming into their home. And immediately, she just knows there's something wrong. There's something wrong. Like, I just know I'm going to be told something very bad. Yeah. And the cops come in and tell her that there's been an accident and that they need to go see the husband in hospital. He was in Nairobi Hospital, where Nairobi Hospital actually is now. It was still being called Nairobi Hospital then. So they leave Lavington and they drive past where the accident had occurred, which is now known as Argwings Kodhek Road, by the way. So they drive past that, and she makes a mental note that the car, where is the car? She's only seeing the debris, but she cannot see the car. And she makes a mental note that she will ask them. So they get to hospital, and he seems okay when they actually get to hospital. He's just injured, but he seems okay. Yeah, he's able to talk and the like. And so afterwards, she goes back home, right? She goes back home, and then the cops come back a second time. And then this second time, she actually says she's not going to open the door because she knows what she's going to be told. You know, that you just know you're going to be told there's something that's gone wrong. So she refuses to open the door. Then eventually she opens it, and then she's told, so you need to come to hospital, which I find is very weird. Like, I find what they say next, I find it a very weird way of telling someone that your husband is dead. So anyway, she's told you need to come to hospital. Your husband is
he needs a surgery.
He needs a surgery, and you need to come sign the consent form. Okay, they get to hospital, and she sees the husband in bed, unresponsive, nothing, and she keeps on calling his name repeatedly, like Argwings. So I can imagine her there. Argwings, Michael, George, and he's not responding. And then she tries to open his lids. They just close back immediately. And then that's when it hits her, oh yeah, my husband is gone. Just like that. And now this is where the speculation begins. You know, there's a lot of tension in the country because we all know there's a lot of politics around Kanu and Kadu and all these things. So there's this suspicion in the family that, and it's something they end up believing, that it was an assassination. And what Joanne actually says in an interview that was conducted around 2013 is that it was planned. It was something that was properly planned. Yeah. Because how do you, like, you as the audience, let's just try think about it. How is it that an accident has happened? Someone has passed by and already the car is gone. Fine, it's been towed away, but that was a very short period of time. And it's how it was just hurried in a sense. And so they end up burying him, obviously. And with the help of State House, she is moved from Lavington, which she actually says she described it as a relief because she was able to now rent out the Lavington home so that she's able to pay for the mortgage, right? And she just has this life with the children, but it's very, very weird that Argwings just dies like that. Then now, again, more speculation. So there's the assassination claim, right?
Yeah.
And then the story about exhuming his body. And you remember his first best man? Charles Njonjo? Yes. So Charles Njonjo comes up with these claims that his injuries look like gunshot wounds. Now, the weird bit is there's no reports of that. Like, there's no autopsy that we can find today around that.
We can't find a permit for the exhibition as well.
Yes.
I mean, we've tried.
Because I mean, in Kenya, I think everywhere, before you exhume a body,
you need a permit.
You need a permit.
Yeah.
So there's no record of that. There's also speculation, but we can't really put this across because it's believed that Kodhek was driving the wife's car, which is a DAF automatic. But at the same time, there's a speculation around it being like his car being part of Moi's entourage or something like that.
Yeah, we don't know. We don't have much about it. It was more of like hearsay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Kodhek dies. And of course, there's a lot of tension because by this time, there's a lot. Those Pio Gama Pinto already passed in 1965. And then now 1969, Argwings Kodhek.
And a month later, his strongest political rival, Tom Mboya, passes on.
Literally a month later. So you can imagine the tension in the country around that time. And one of the ways that there isn't much that's said about him, but one thing that Jomo Kenyatta does is name the road that he died on after him.
Yeah.
What we now know as Argwings Kodhek Road is that's where the accident occurred.
And
it's a very
Mzee also declares him a mashuja.
Yeah.
At some point. But the details of his life are so sketchy. Not sketchy, but so scarce and few and in between that his death at the end is ruled as a mysterious car accident. Some say it rolled. But that's pretty much it. And it raises, as Ngina has put it, it raises quite a lot of questions. And as much as his death overshadows some of his life's work, it's important to remember how he was a staunch Mau Mau lawyer, how he fought for the rights of people all across the board, and just his steadfastness to do the right thing, because that's what kept him going. Yeah. That's why he was considered to be such a great person, and he lived up to his name at one point. So unfortunately, that's all we have it for today's episode. We hope you enjoyed it. As usual, all the sources that we have used will be linked in the description below. And if we've missed out anything, please tell us. And we'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much.